A remote mountain ranger followed a trail that was never meant to exist. What she uncovered cost her everything: her safety, her trust, nearly her life. Left bleeding in the snow, she should have been alone. But she wasn't. A wounded German shepherd stood between her and the dark, and a man who had sworn never to return to the fight stepped out of the storm. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story moves you, please subscribe for more. Winter arrived early in the Silver Pine Range, pressing down on the land with a quiet, relentless weight. Dawn crept slowly over the mountains of western Montana, a pale gray light filtering through dense clouds heavy with snow. The town of Coldwater Junction, nearly 30 miles downhill, was still asleep. A scattering of dark rooftops and frozen streets tucked against the valley like an afterthought. Up here, at nearly 6,000 feet, civilization thinned to a single lifeline. Pine Hollow Ranger Station, a weather-beaten outpost surrounded by endless forest and white silence. Snow had been falling all night. By morning it lay thick and unbroken, swallowing trails, softening the sharp lines of the pines, muting every sound except the whisper of wind moving through branches. Visibility was poor, no more than 100 yards at best, and the cold had teeth. This was the kind of winter that punished mistakes. Elena Brooks stepped out of the ranger station and pulled the hood of her parka tighter around her face. She was in her early 30s, of average height, with a lean, wiry build shaped by years of working outdoors in unforgiving terrain. Strands of dark auburn hair escaped her knit cap, brushing against cheeks reddened by cold. Her face bore sharp, intelligent features, high cheekbones, steady brown eyes, and a mouth set in a line that suggested equal parts resolve and fatigue. She moved with quiet confidence, boots crunching softly into the fresh snow. Beside her, Coda waited patiently. The German shepherd sat tall and alert, his thick sable coat dusted with snowflakes that clung to his fur without melting. His ears were erect, swiveling at every faint sound, and his amber-brown eyes scanned the tree line with focused intensity. Coda was not young, but he was strong, his movements controlled, deliberate, shaped by training rather than instinct alone. A harness fitted snugly across his chest bore the insignia of the Forest Service, worn but carefully maintained. To Elena, Coda was more than a working dog. In a place like Pine Hollow, where winter storms could cut off contact for days and backup was never close, he was her constant, her shadow, her anchor. "Let's check the north sensors first," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Coda rose immediately, falling into step at her side. The north access route was a narrow winter trail, used officially only by ranger patrols and emergency crews. Elena had reviewed the overnight data twice already before stepping outside, and the readings bothered her. Motion sensors along the trail had registered heavy movement shortly before midnight. Not wildlife, not snowdrift interference, something with weight. As they moved deeper into the forest, Elena's gaze sharpened. The snow here was disturbed, not churned wildly, but compressed in long, shallow grooves. She crouched, brushing away loose powder with a gloved hand. Snowmobile tracks, not recreational ones. These were wider, heavier, reinforced treads designed for hauling loads through deep snow. She straightened slowly, a familiar unease settling into her chest. "This route is restricted," she said quietly. No permits came through. Coda lowered his head, sniffing the air. A low rumble vibrated in his chest, not a growl, but something close, alert, warning. They continued, and the signs multiplied. Several trees along the trail bore fresh markings. Small, deliberate notches cut into the bark, partially concealed but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. Trail markers, not official Forest Service markings. Elena's jaw tightened. Again, she thought. Over the past month, paperwork had gone missing. Routine patrol reports were returned with vague notes requesting revisions. 2 fellow rangers she trusted had been reassigned abruptly. One to administrative duty, another transferred out of state with little explanation. Every time she raised concerns, the answers were polite, distant, carefully empty. Something was wrong in Silver Pine. The trail opened into a small clearing, and Elena stopped short. 3 vehicles sat parked in a loose line. Specialized snow rigs with reinforced frames and enclosed cargo sections. They were clean. Too clean. Their engines were still warm. A group of 4 men stood nearby, clustered around a set of metal crates, partially covered with tarps. One of them turned as Elena approached. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a square jaw and pale skin weathered by cold. His hair was cropped short beneath a helmet marked with a generic Environmental Survey logo. The others wore matching outerwear, dark insulated jackets, uniform gloves, mirrored goggles. Efficient. Coordinated. "Morning," the man said, offering a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't expect company up here?" Elena kept her posture relaxed, but her hand rested instinctively near the radio clipped to her belt. "Pine Hollow Ranger Station," she replied evenly. "This is a restricted trail. I don't have any approved permits for survey work in this zone." The man stepped forward, pulling a laminated badge from his jacket and holding it up just long enough to be seen, not examined. "Geological and environmental assessment," he said. "Contracted, seasonal work. Should all be filed with regional." Elena glanced at the badge, then back at the crates. "What kind of assessment requires cargo containers rated for sub-zero transport?" she asked. The smile faded slightly. Behind her, Coda shifted his weight, positioning himself subtly between Elena and the group. The man exhaled, the sound sharp in the cold air. "Look, Ranger, Brooks, right?" He glanced at the name patch on her jacket. "We're behind schedule. Weather's already slowing us down. We don't need interference." "Interference," Elena repeated calmly. "Or oversight." One of the men behind him muttered something under his breath. Another adjusted his grip on a long metal tool resting against his thigh. Elena took a step closer to the nearest crate. The metal was industrial grade, thick, sealed, frost-resistant, the kind used for sensitive materials, not soil samples. Her instincts screamed. "Open it," she said. "Protocol requires inspection." The leader's eyes hardened. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping, "you're making this difficult." That was when it happened. A sudden shove from the side knocked Elena off balance. She hit the ground hard, the impact driving the breath from her lungs. Before she could reach for her radio, a boot came down on her wrist, pinning her hand to the snow. Pain flared. "Coda!" she shouted. The German shepherd launched himself forward in a blur of motion and sound. He collided with the nearest man, teeth flashing, force driving the attacker backward into the snow. Coda's bark cut through the clearing, sharp, commanding, fearless. The response was brutal. A heavy metal rod swung down, striking Coda across the ribs with a dull crack. The dog yelped but did not retreat. He lunged again, snapping, fighting, buying time. Another blow caught him at the side of the head. Elena screamed as a second man dragged her upright, her vision blurring. She struggled, but a sharp strike to her temple sent stars exploding across her sight. The world tilted. She fell. Dimly, through the ringing in her ears, she saw Coda stagger, still trying to stand, his body shaking with effort and pain. One of the men kicked him hard, sending him sprawling into the snow beside her. "Enough!" the leader snapped. "We're done here." Elena felt hands rifling through her pockets, her radio torn away, crushed beneath a boot. The last thing she registered was the sound of engines starting, snow spraying as the vehicles pulled away. Then silence. Snow drifted down, gentle and indifferent, covering blood, covering tracks, covering truth. Elena lay still, consciousness slipping in and out, her breath shallow and uneven. Beside her, Koda's body was warm against the cold, his breathing ragged but present. One of his paws twitched, pressing weakly against her sleeve. She managed to turn her head just enough to see him. "You did good," she whispered, the words barely audible. "Stay. Stay with me." The forest did not answer. The wind carried on through the trees, and the snow continued to fall, erasing the clearing inch by inch. Pine Hollow Ranger Station stood silent in the distance, unaware that its guardians lay broken beneath the weight of a winter that had just revealed its teeth. The storm had not stopped. It had only changed its rhythm. Snow fell sideways through the trees, driven by a restless wind that bent the tops of the pines and erased distance. The forest above Coldwater Junction felt sealed off from the rest of the world. No roads cleared, no radio chatter, no easy way in or out. In weather like this, the mountains decided who lived and who did not. Noah Carter moved through the trees with practiced restraint. He was tall, lean, and built with the kind of compact strength that came from years of disciplined training rather than bulk. His dark hair was cut short, practical, already dusted with snow, and his face, clean-shaven, sharp-jawed, carried the stillness of someone who had learned to conserve motion. A heavy winter jacket, faded and patched at the elbows, hung open just enough to allow freedom of movement. Old habits died hard. He had come out to check his trap line before the storm buried it completely. That was the excuse he used anyway. The truth was simpler. Movement kept the noise out of his head. Then he saw the blood. It was not much, just a dark smear against the white. But it stopped him instantly. Noah dropped to one knee, fingers brushing the snow beside it. The stain was fresh, not frozen solid yet. Nearby, the surface of the snow was disturbed in a long, uneven trail, as if something heavy had been dragged. He stood slowly, eyes scanning. More signs appeared the longer he looked. Deep impressions from reinforced snowmobile treads. Not recreational, not local. And beside them, paw prints, large. German Shepherd, if he had to guess. The gait was off, uneven, as though the animal had been injured while moving. Noah exhaled through his nose, a slow, controlled breath. His body shifted without conscious command. Shoulders squared, weight redistributed. The part of him he pretended was gone slid quietly back into place. He followed the trail. The wind howled louder as the trees thinned near a small clearing. Noah reached it and stopped short. Two figures lay half buried in snow. The woman was face down, her parka torn at the shoulder, dark hair tangled and stiff with ice. One arm was twisted beneath her at an unnatural angle. Beside her lay a German Shepherd, its thick coat matted with blood, chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Noah crossed the distance in seconds. He knelt beside the woman first, rolling her carefully onto her side. She was alive. Barely. Her pulse was fast and weak, skin cold to the touch. A blow to the head had left a purpling bruise along her temple. Ranger jacket, Forest Service insignia. "Stay with me," he said quietly, not expecting a response. He moved to the dog next. The shepherd's eyes flickered open at his approach, teeth bared weakly in reflex. Noah paused, hands visible, voice low. "Easy? I'm not here to hurt you." The dog's growl faltered, replaced by a pained whine. One of its ribs shifted oddly beneath Noah's careful touch. Head trauma, possibly internal injuries, hypothermia setting in fast. Noah did not hesitate. He worked with the calm precision of a combat medic. Jacket off, emergency blanket from his pack. He wrapped the woman first, insulating her core, then pressed gauze against a bleeding cut near her hairline. He checked her airway, adjusted her position, kept her breathing steady. For the dog, he did the same. Improvised splinting, pressure where he could apply it, hands steady despite the cold, biting into his fingers. Snow soaked into his clothes. He ignored it. time mattered. The storm worsened as he lifted them. The dog was heavy, solid muscle, even injured, but Noah carried him without complaint, shifting the woman's weight across his shoulder. The cabin was less than a mile away, uphill through the trees. In clear weather, it would have been nothing. Today, it felt endless. By the time the cabin came into view, a low, weather-scarred structure tucked against a rock face. Noah's legs burned, breath fogging thick in the air. He forced the door open and moved inside, kicking it shut against the wind. The cabin was sparse but functional. One room, wood stove, a narrow cot, shelves lined with canned food and old gear. Heat crept slowly back into the space as Noah fed the fire, then laid the woman on the cot and the dog on a thick blanket near the stove. He stripped off wet outer layers, replaced them with dry ones, and worked through his limited supplies with ruthless efficiency. This was not a hospital. It was enough. Or it would have to be. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time blurred. The woman stirred first. Her eyes opened sharply, unfocused, then locked onto him. Panic flared instantly. "Don't move," Noah said, stepping back to give her space. "You're safe. You were injured." Her gaze flicked to the door, then to the dog. "Coda." "He's alive," Noah said. "Badly hurt, but alive." She tried to sit up and failed, a sharp breath escaping her. Her jaw clenched, frustration and fear warring on her face. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Noah." "That's not an answer." He met her eyes evenly. "It's the only one you're getting right now." She studied him. His stance, his hands, the way he positioned himself between her and the door without seeming to. She didn't like it, but the pain and exhaustion were winning. "I'm Elena Brooks," she said finally. "Ranger." "I figured." Her eyes narrowed. "You could have left us?" He didn't argue. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Later, while Elena drifted in and out of restless sleep and Coda lay breathing more steadily near the stove, Noah stepped to the window. Snowmobile tracks cut faint lines through the trees, already filling in with fresh snow. He followed them with his eyes until they vanished. Something about them nagged at him. Not just the weight, the spacing, the angle at which they'd left the clearing. He had seen it before, years ago on a frozen border far from here, during an operation that never officially happened. The terrain had been different, the stakes louder, but the method, the winter corridor, the timing, the equipment, was the same. Back then, they had been told to stand down. Data sealed, questions unanswered. Noah clenched his jaw. He had walked away from that life for a reason, buried it under snow and silence and isolation. But standing there, watching the storm swallow the forest, he knew something had followed him. When Elena woke again, the light had dimmed outside, the storm still pressing against the cabin walls. "I need to get back to the station," she said weakly. "You're not going anywhere," Noah replied. "Not like this?" She didn't like it, but she didn't fight him either. He looked at the dog, then back at the window. Leaving had always been his instinct. Disappear, move on. This time he stayed. Morning light filtered weakly through the storm clouds, turning the snow outside the cabin into a flat sheet of white glare. The wind had softened, but the cold remained absolute, seeping into the logs and settling into the bones of everything alive. Inside, the fire crackled low and steady. Elena Brooks lay propped against a stack of folded blankets on the cot. Her left arm was immobilized in a makeshift sling, and bruising had deepened along the side of her face, blooming into dark purples and yellows. Pain etched itself into every small movement, but her eyes were sharp, alert, tracking the room with methodical care. Injury had slowed her body, not her mind. Coda lay several feet away on a thick wool blanket near the stove. His chest rose and fell in shallow but steady breaths. One ear twitched intermittently, responding to sounds Elena could no longer hear. the shift of snow sliding from branches, the subtle creak of the cabin settling. When Noah moved, Coda's eyes followed, focused and watchful despite exhaustion. Noah stood near the table, cleaning blood from a small utility knife with a strip of cloth. His movements were economical, practiced. He had been outside twice already since dawn, checking the perimeter, reading the snow like a map that refused to lie. Elena broke the silence. "They pulled 3 patrol reports from the system last month," she said quietly. No explanation, just gone. Noah didn't look up, but he listened. Motion sensor alerts, vehicle sightings, animal disruptions along the North Ridge. She swallowed, then continued. "Every time I flagged something as inconsistent, it got buried in review, or kicked back with comments that didn't make sense." She shifted, wincing as pain flared through her ribs. "My supervisor stopped returning my calls," she added. "Then Ranger Calloway got reassigned to Boise. No notice, just packed and gone." Noah folded the cloth and set the knife aside. He turned to face her. "You think someone higher up knew?" he said. "I think someone higher up didn't want to know," Elena replied. "There's a difference." Coda let out a low sound, half sigh, half growl, as if in agreement. Noah grabbed his jacket and stepped toward the door. "I need to check something," he said. Outside, the forest felt stripped bare by the storm. Tracks from the night before had softened, but not vanished. Noah moved along the ridgeline above the clearing where he'd found Elena and Coda, eyes scanning for patterns rather than prints. It was there. A narrow descent cutting diagonally across the slope, shielded by dense firs. Not a trail. Not officially. But used often enough to compress the snow into a subtle, repeating channel. Snowmobiles could pass through without leaving obvious marks if driven carefully. Cargo could be moved downhill, out of sight, toward the valley roads. A winter corridor. Noah crouched, brushing snow aside to expose the packed surface beneath. The spacing between compression points told him more than any footprint. This route wasn't improvised. It had been planned, tested, refined. He straightened slowly. Back inside, he spread a rough map across the table. Hand-drawn, edges worn. He marked the corridor, then another line farther east. The pattern emerged quickly. Elena watched from the cot, her expression tightening as she followed his movements. "That route bypasses the main ranger road," she said, "and avoids the camera sweep." "Yes," Noah replied, "and it's only usable in winter." Her eyes flicked up to his. "Why winter?" "Because snow erases mistakes," he said, "and because no one expects heavy movement when conditions are lethal." Coda lifted his head, ears angling toward the door. Elena hesitated, then spoke again. "If this is just smuggling, why attack me? Why not let the storm finish the job?" Noah met her gaze. "Because you saw something you weren't supposed to," he said, "and because leaving you alive would have been a variable." Silence settled between them, heavy but shared. Noah reached into his pack and pulled out a satellite phone, small, nondescript, scratched from years of use. Elena's eyes narrowed. "You don't live like a hunter," she said slowly. "Not really." He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped outside again, shielding the phone from the wind, and dialed. The call connected after 3 rings. A voice came through, calm, faintly amused. "You always pick terrible weather to call." "Still tracking seasonal anomalies?" Noah asked. "Always," the voice replied. "You sound tense." The man on the other end was Evan Mercer, late 30s by Noah's memory, with prematurely gray hair and a habit of smiling even when delivering bad news. He worked civilian now, contracted analysis, specializing in satellite imagery and terrain movement. He had been the quiet one on Noah's old team, the one who noticed what others missed. "I need eyes," Noah said. "Northern Montana. Winter corridors." There was a pause, fingers tapping keys. "Hold," Evan said. Then, "That's interesting. What is?" "Thermal signatures spike every winter along a band that doesn't match logging, recreation, or wildlife migration," Evan replied. "Same window, same depth of snow, always disappears by spring." Noah closed his eyes briefly. "So I'm not imagining it." "No," Evan said. "And it's not random." Noah ended the call without further explanation. When he returned inside, Elena was watching him closely. "You confirmed it," she said. "Yes?" Her jaw tightened. "Then this isn't just criminals slipping contraband through the woods?" "No," Noah agreed. "It's organized, protected." Coda shifted, attempting to stand. His legs trembled, but he forced himself upright, staggering once before steadying. Noah moved quickly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Easy," he murmured. Coda leaned into him, breathing hard but alert. His eyes went to the door again. Elena followed his gaze. "He's sensing something." "He's sensing timing," Noah said. "Not danger yet, anticipation." Elena absorbed that, then spoke softly. "They'll come back?" "Yes." "To finish what they started?" "To clean," Noah replied. "Evidence? Tracks? Anything left behind?" Elena looked down at her sling, then back at Noah. "And you?" He considered the question. "I stayed," he said. "That wasn't my instinct." "But it's your choice," she said. He nodded once. Outside, the wind rose again, carrying with it the weight of coming movement. Snow fell harder, thicker, as if the mountain itself was trying to hide what had already been exposed. Inside the cabin, 3 survivors waited, each carrying pieces of a truth that refused to stay buried. Night fell hard over the Silver Pine Range, not with darkness alone, but with pressure. The wind returned in violent gusts, driving snow in sharp horizontal sheets that erased depth and distance. The forest groaned under the weight of ice. Branches snapped somewhere in the distance, sharp cracks swallowed instantly by the storm. Noah Carter stood just inside the tree line, motionless. The cabin lights were dark. Smoke from the chimney had been cut hours earlier. Nothing about the place suggested life. That was deliberate. Far below, engines growled, low, controlled, nothing like the recreational noise of tourists. Snowmobiles, heavy, purpose-built. They moved without urgency, confident in their timing. Noah watched their approach through gaps in the trees, counting silhouettes. 5. They stopped short of the clearing, engines cut, men dismounted with efficient, practiced movements. No uniforms this time. No patches. Dark winter combat gear absorbed the light, helmets matte, faces hidden behind goggles, and scarves. Each carried a rifle slung low, muzzles angled down, but ready. The casual certainty in their posture said they expected no resistance. Noah turned and moved uphill, silent as falling ash. He did not intend to defend the cabin. It was a fixed point, predictable. Instead, he led them away from it, into ground he understood better than they did. The slope narrowed ahead, funneling into a ravine where wind had scoured the snow thin. Rocks jutted out like broken teeth. A stand of dead trees leaned precariously over the drop, roots exposed by erosion. Noah slipped between them and waited. The men advanced in a loose, staggered line, spacing tight enough for communication, but loose enough to avoid a single point of failure. One of them raised a fist. They halted. A hand signal passed between them. 2 fingers, then a slow sweep forward. They knew the terrain mattered. The first man stepped onto the ravine floor. The snow beneath his boot collapsed. Not a pit, just a sudden loss of footing as compacted ice sheared away. He fell hard, rifle clattering against rock. The sound echoed louder than Noah would have liked, but the damage was done. The formation broke. Another man swore under his breath, his voice audible through the storm. Noah noted it. Discipline was already slipping. A sharp metallic click followed. One of them had activated a handheld radio, gloved fingers moving quickly across the controls. The device was military-grade, sealed casing, encrypted interface, the kind that did not belong in civilian hands. "Grid compromised," the man said quietly. "Thermal sweep negative." That was the mistake. Noah pivoted and moved again, angling farther upslope. He stayed ahead of them, never seen, never heard. Just enough disturbance to pull them along. At the cabin, Elena Brooks sat hunched at the small table, jaw clenched against pain as she worked one-handed. Her sling limited her movement, but not her reach. She keyed in a sequence on the battered Ranger console mounted to the wall, a relic most stations had phased out years ago. An emergency system. Manual, unreliable, ignored because it was old. She activated it anyway. The console responded with a dull hum. A red indicator blinked once, then again, slower this time. The signal wouldn't transmit cleanly through the storm, but it would log. Timestamp, location, system override. She switched screens, hands steady despite the ache radiating through her ribs, and began recording. Audio, visual, whatever the sensors picked up would be stored automatically. Outside, Coda lifted his head sharply. His body was still weak, movements slower than they should have been, but his focus was absolute. His ears pinned forward, nose working the air. Something had changed. Noah felt it too. The men had split into pairs. One team veered toward the cabin, the other continued uphill, straight toward him. He adjusted his route, drawing the latter group deeper into the trees. Snow thickened underfoot. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. He slowed deliberately, allowing them to close the distance just enough to feel confident. A rifle barked suddenly. The shot went wide, the crack swallowed by the storm, but the message was clear. They had lost patience. Noah dove as another round snapped past where his head had been a moment before. Wood splintered behind him. He rolled, came up moving, heart rate steady, mind cold and precise. This was not a firefight. It was a delay. He led them toward the dead trees. One of the men sprinted, trying to flank. His boot caught on exposed root, momentum carrying him forward. He collided with a dead trunk just as Noah yanked hard on a pre-cut vine. The tree gave way. It didn't fall cleanly. It collapsed sideways, dragging another with it. Snow and debris cascaded down, a brief avalanche of noise and movement. One man disappeared beneath it with a shout. Another staggered back, balance lost. Noah was already gone. At the edge of the clearing, the second team reached the cabin. One of them kicked the door. It held. Another raised his rifle, aiming at the window. A low, guttural growl cut through the wind. Coda stood in the doorway. His stance was unsteady, but his presence was undeniable. Teeth bared, eyes locked, a warning written into muscle and instinct. The man froze. That hesitation saved Noah's life. He emerged from the trees behind them, closed the distance in silence, and struck hard with the butt of his weapon. The man went down without a sound. The second turned too late, rifle swinging wide as Noah tackled him into the snow. They hit the ground hard. Noah wrenched the rifle free and rolled, coming up with it trained on the man's chest. "Don't," Noah said quietly. The man's eyes flicked to Coda, then back to Noah. He didn't move. From the ravine came another radio call, frantic this time, clipped and tense. Coordinates, casualty report. Orders shouted over interference. Elena's console recorded everything. A distant thump rolled through the storm. At first it sounded like thunder. Then it came again. Steady, rhythmic. Rotors. Noah lifted his gaze to the sky, snow stinging his face. Somewhere beyond the clouds, a helicopter cut through the storm, its presence undeniable, even when unseen. He secured the downed men quickly, methodical despite the chaos, and moved back toward the cabin. Elena met him at the door, pale but resolute. Coda braced at her side. "You got it?" she asked. "Yes," Noah replied. She nodded once. Above them, the sound of the helicopter grew louder, closer, carving a path through the storm that could no longer hide what had been uncovered. The helicopter broke through the cloud cover just before dawn, its lights cutting clean arcs across the snow-laden forest. Wind flattened the treetops beneath it, sending powder spiraling into the air like smoke. When it touched down in the clearing, the storm seemed to recoil, pushed back by noise, authority, and motion. Men and women poured out with practiced efficiency. They wore layered winter gear marked with federal insignia, faces set with the calm focus of people accustomed to arriving where order had already fractured. One of them stepped forward immediately. A tall woman in her early 40s with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight braid beneath her helmet. Her posture was straight, her movements precise, eyes sharp and unflinching. Special Agent Claire Donnelly, Homeland Security Investigations. She surveyed the scene in seconds. The downed snowmobiles, the restrained men, the battered terrain that told a story of pursuit and resistance. Her gaze lingered briefly on Noah, then shifted to Elena and Coda. "Who's in charge here?" she asked. Elena stepped forward, her arm still in a sling but her voice steady. "I am, Ranger Elena Brooks." Donnelly nodded once, acknowledging both the title and the condition. "Medical is inbound. We'll take it from here." Teams fanned out immediately. One group secured the detainees, cuffing them carefully, cataloging weapons with gloved hands. The rifles were sealed, serialized, photographed. Radios were bagged and tagged. Every detail mattered now. Another team followed the corridor Noah had marked, deploying stakes and beacons that flashed dull blue against the snow. The winter route, the hidden artery, was sealed off piece by piece. No more movement would pass unseen. Inside the cabin, medics worked quietly. A young man with sandy hair and a freckled nose. Eli Ramirez, a federal EMT barely out of his 20s, knelt beside Coda with gentle confidence. His voice was soft, his hands steady as he checked vitals and adjusted bandages. "He's tough," Eli said with a small smile. "Won't like the rest, but he'll heal." Coda huffed weakly, tail thumping once against the blanket. Elena watched, relief loosening something deep in her chest. Outside, Donnelly approached Noah again. Snow clung to his jacket, melting slowly into dark patches. "You didn't have to stay," she said. Noah met her gaze. "Someone had to." She studied him more closely now, his stance, the economy of his movements, the way he watched the perimeter even as the danger receded. "We've been tracking this corridor for years," she added. "Never had enough to act. Until tonight." Elena joined them, standing taller despite the pain. "The logs are complete, time-stamped, audio and visual." Donnelly's expression shifted. Not surprise, but satisfaction. "That changes everything." By mid-morning, the storm had passed. The sky cleared into a hard, brilliant blue that made the snowfields shimmer. Federal vehicles lined the access road below, their presence unmistakable. The mountains looked the same as they always had, vast, indifferent. But the weight pressing on the valley had lifted. Paperwork followed, interviews, statements taken with care and patience. Noah answered every question plainly. No embellishment, no secrets offered beyond what was asked. When the topic of his past arose, Donnelly listened closely, then nodded. "Your record isn't as buried as you think," she said. "Some of it was misfiled, conveniently." "What happens now?" Noah asked. She glanced toward the ridge where agents continued marking the corridor. Now the right people look at the right things. Later that afternoon, Elena stood alone at the edge of the clearing, watching as the last detainee was escorted toward a waiting vehicle. Donnelly approached her quietly. "We're recommending you for permanent command of Pine Hollow," the agent said, "effective immediately." Elena turned, startled. You were right to keep pushing, Donnelly continued. And you paid for it? That matters. Elena exhaled slowly, emotion flickering across her face before she mastered it. Thank you. Coda was brought out shortly after, supported by a sling and Eli's careful guidance. He paused when he saw Elena, then stepped toward her, pressing his head gently against her hip. She rested her good hand on his neck. You're staying, she murmured. With me? The decision settled easily between them. As the day wore on, the federal presence thinned. Vehicles departed. Agents disappeared down the mountain roads. The forest reclaimed its silence. Donnelly found Noah one last time as the sun dipped low. You have options, she said. You can leave or you can stay. Either way, what happened here won't follow you. Noah looked out across the snow-covered peaks, their edges softened by distance and light. He thought of the corridor now sealed, the cabin, the quiet that felt earned rather than borrowed. I'll stay, he said. She nodded. We could use someone like you, training, winter response, search and rescue. That's what I was thinking. The agreement required no handshake. Weeks passed, Pine Hollow changed, subtly but unmistakably. New equipment arrived, radios that worked, clear protocols. Elena settled into her role as station lead with a natural authority that felt less like promotion and more like alignment. Rangers came to her with questions, and she answered them honestly. Noah trained with them when needed, his instruction calm and precise. He taught how to read snow under pressure, how to move without leaving panic behind, how to listen to the land before it turned hostile. He did not talk about the past. He didn't need to. Coda returned to patrol gradually, strength returning with each careful step. He learned the new rhythms, accepted new faces, but his place remained at Elena's side. One morning, under a sky washed clean by overnight snowfall, the three of them stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. The air was cold and clear. Sunlight fractured across the peaks, turning the world sharp and bright. No engines, no radios crackling with urgency. Just wind, snow, and breath. Noah rested his hands on his jacket pockets, shoulders easy for the first time in years. Elena stood beside him, posture relaxed, gaze steady. Coda sat between them, alert but at peace. The mountains did not promise safety, but they offered honesty. And for the first time, that was enough. Sometimes, peace isn't found by running away from the world. It's found by standing still and choosing to protect what truly matters. In our everyday lives, we all face moments when fear, exhaustion, or past wounds tempt us to retreat. But healing often begins the moment we stop hiding and start showing up. For others, and for ourselves. This story is a reminder that loyalty, courage, and quiet responsibility can change lives. Whether it's a friend who never leaves your side, a job you keep showing up for, or a promise you refuse to break. Those small acts of standing firm are what build real peace. If this story moved you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need that reminder today. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of this journey resonated with you most? Leave a comment and join the conversation. And if you enjoy stories that explore courage, healing, and the powerful bond between humans and animals, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. More stories like this are coming, and we'd be honored to have you with us.